Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rise and Grind Morning Show. We're going to be talking about Chris Spielman today. And there's a couple of really good videos on him. One podcast with him and his brother on CBS, NFL on CBS, and then also the football life of Chris Spielman. And of course, I wrote an article last April about Chris Spielman and just how important he has been to this team and his role in what he's done since he's been back with the Detroit Lions. So, hey, good morning, Eric and Chef. What's happening this morning? We'll go right to left this morning. We'll start with you this morning, Eric.
Got my lawn mowed yesterday, caught up on packages, getting things back to normal here. Put together about 1,000 flashlights yesterday, boxed them up, got them all packaged, ready to go out the door. So that was my day yesterday. Lots of fun.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Chef, what's happening in Aussie land today?
Nothing much, man. Same old kangaroos hopping around the road. Funny story, me and my wife the other night, we were driving down the road in the left lane, and in the right lane, came hopping, right? A baby kangaroo. And hopefully it had a happy ending. I'm not sure, but I know the people in the right lane behind us had to swerve. But yeah, he was fully hopping down the street the wrong way.
I don't think kangaroos have a care in the world which way they're going, do they?
No, they don't.
So right away, I can already see something's disappeared in my notes today on the 3 keys to leadership and what was on the actual note that they signed. I don't know if you guys could probably hear my audio if I go back and check, but maybe you guys will know exactly what they said. But hey, good morning to everybody in the chat. Let's see who's with us this morning. We have Tracy's in the house, Mike P's in the house, Michael Garrity again, Joseph Ostin. Who else is in here today? We got Rick, Roger Chappis. And if I'm missing anybody, it's not by purpose. I just don't see it yet. We got Sack the Pack.
I like that one.
That's a new name. Welcome in this morning. So let's get it rolling. Let's talk about Chris Spielman. So I've learned a lot once again, diving into, he is a Lions legend, right? He that's part of why I wrote what I wrote last year about Chris Spielman. And to be honest with you, I don't think enough people outside of Detroit really gave him enough credit to just how good he was on the field. There was a stat that I learned last night that it was with the Buffalo Bills. He had 216 tackles in one season with the Bills. And, here we thought 150 was a lot, or 216 tackles in one season.
That's insane.
That's incredible. But 216 car crashes back then is a bit different than what it is today. It's a way different level of football back then than what it is today. There was also an interesting topic, where he was talking about tackling, I believe it was Jerome Bettis, and he got chipped from behind. So he got blocked in the back, probably didn't throw a flag, and his arm went into Bettis and it snapped his pectoral muscle off, and it was just kind of floating on this side, and his arm was stuck up. I don't think you can see it, but his arm was stuck like this, so he's running around the field trying to make a tackle with his arm stuck like this. And then every time he'd get back to the huddle, they had to push it back down to stop the spasm. That's football, man. That's what I grew up with. That's how we played. Like, we didn't care. Injuries be damned. We didn't care. Like, we wanted to stay on the field. I remember vividly, and I don't know how, but I do remember one of the worst hits I ever took when I was playing football. It was 9th grade. I was on the Pink Panthers return team, and the kick was kicked a little bit short, and this is high school football, and I got crushed, and the lights went out, and I got crushed. So clearly had, concussion. I went in the next play. So I came off the field, went back in the field, and it was just dim lights the rest of the day. And, we didn't know anything about concussions back then, but what we know now, clearly, I suffered one, at a very young age. But I think I'm okay. I think I've done all right.
I had a similar, well, not a similar situation, but I ran through the hole and I got hit by a lineman, and his face mask print was embedded in my helmet.
Wow.
Yeah, but I hopped up and said that the hit didn't phase me. I don't think I was concussed. I think I was okay. But yeah, it looked worse than it was. But yeah, you could see like the print of the face mask in my helmet.
That's a lot of pressure to be able to leave a face, print or face mask print in your helmet. That's crazy, man. That's a big hit.
Yeah. That's the biggest one I ever took.
I want to recap, part of this podcast, and I'm not going to show any of it today because it is NFL on CBS, and I have a feeling it'll get taken down, even though we should be allowed to do these things. It's a conversation that I'm going to have with YouTube today. But how Spielman got his job, I think that this was probably, right away in this show, and I didn't know this. Like, I did not know this part of Spielman joining the Detroit Lions, and it just speaks volumes to who Chris Spielman is, right? And you guys know what I'm talking about. So let me just jump into it. Rod Wood called him out of the blue, and this was after the Quinn Trisha era was, coming to an end. And Rod Wood calls Chris Spielman like, hey, would you like to interview for the GM job? And right away, you would think that, if I were to get that call, I'd be like, heck yeah, of course. I don't care. I've got just as good of a shot as anybody. I may not have as much experience as what they have, but he immediately said, I'm not qualified. I am not qualified to be a GM. And then what he said next, it just blew me away, but it made so much sense as to why this team has been so successful. He said, but I do know what a great one looks like. I've been around a lot of teams. I've been around a lot of meetings. I've been in a lot, all 32 teams. He was, at this time, he was an NFL correspondent. I believe he was doing TV, right? And so he was in, at all different teams, locations. And he would go through practices and training camps and whatever and visit and see these GMs and how they interact with their people. And he said he knew what he liked and what he didn't like and what was working and what wasn't working. And so from that perspective, he was basically telling Rod Wood, listen, I can't be your GM. I don't feel I'm qualified to be your GM, but I can help you find one. And I can help you find a really good one. And it was at that point that Rod Wood kind of said, all right, well, I'll go back and talk with Sheila and whatever. And then called him back and said, hey, will you talk to Sheila? And they have a conversation, with Sheila. And basically from there, they carved out a position, which is what he's doing now. So he's kind of a special assistant to Rod Wood and Sheila. And, his goal as a GM, and then I'm going to turn it loose on you guys and you tell me what you remember about this, but his goal, which really resonated with me, was to just give honest and open feedback to the people in the room. It doesn't matter who it is. He doesn't care if it's Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, AG, Sheila, Rod Wood. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He just wants to be the guy that, not necessarily rubs people the wrong way, but he's not afraid to tell them how he truly feels. And for instance, and I'll like I said, I'll turn it to you guys. He made, he gave one example where, if Ben Johnson's working up a play, Ben may ask him, and he wants to be asked. He doesn't want to go out and just say these things. He wants to be asked, right? He'll wait to be asked. What do you think of this play? And he'll tell him straight up. I think it's crap. I think it's great. I think this, I think that. And they can do what they want with it at that point. It's not like they have to make a change. They don't have to be in fear that what he says is the end all be all. No, he's just giving honest, open feedback to these guys and ladies to maybe do a little bit better job. So Eric, I'll kick it over to you. We'll go right to left. Like I said, what do you think about that first interaction there in this podcast about Chris Spielman and how he started with this position?
Yeah, I found it kind of amazing. And as a fan, watching how this all unfolded, none of us had any idea why they hired Spielman, what his role was with the team. They kept it really secret. They really didn't let the cat out of the bag, other than he was helping them hire the coach and hire the GM, and to find out that he has a copy of the defensive playbook right there in his office for this season. And he's memorizing the entire defensive playbook before. That's what he's doing on this 6 weeks off. He's memorizing the defense. So he knows every single play, what every single person on the defense should be doing. And then he sits in on offensive meetings. He goes and watches the QB room or the wide receivers and sits in on their meetings so he can learn more about the offense. That just tells me this guy has his finger on the pulse of the team. He knows what they need, and he knows what kind of honest feedback to give to the coach and the GM about, this is the type of player we need. That guy's not fitting in. This guy's fitting in great. And it's not all roses and cheesecake, Sometimes you got to be brutally honest and say, hey, this guy's a turd. We got to go with somebody else. So I really like that he is able to distance himself from everyone and be able to be impartial and say, this is what I think we need.
Yeah, I think that's great insight as far as what you exactly said. I mean, he's not only just here to do his job, but this year he said he's taking more of a stance on learning everything. He wants to know exactly what formations they're doing and why, and what they're doing on the offense and defense and why. He kind of briefly glossed over it and said, I kind of knew, the X's and O's, obviously being a football player, but I wanted to know the finite details. I want to know everything that's going on with everybody so that I can be, more of a help to them, not a hindrance to them. I need to know more about what they're doing so that I can understand it. And Chef, do you remember what he said about, these guys in these positions, how they shouldn't really fear, him as someone taking their job? Do you remember what he was saying about that?
Yeah, so he was alluding to that. First of all, I just want to let Eric know, I don't know if you like rose water. I don't like rose water, so I wouldn't do roses and cheesecake, but that just sounds like a very interesting thing that you threw out there. So
yeah, that was definitely different.
But what he was alluding to, because he alluded to it earlier in the interview, when he was talking about Dan Campbell, and he wasn't afraid to hire people that were a threat to him. And just, if we look at it just from a life perspective, if you just have the type of aura about you and the presence about you that you're just not, I'm trying to hire the best person to work underneath me. It doesn't matter if they're great at their job, and someone else might look at them and say, hey, you're really good at your job, let's replace this guy. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to have the best people on my team so that we can be the best. And I think that is the type of culture that permeates, throughout this organization right now. But as far as Chris Spielman himself, shout out. And I got to do my shout out. Shout out Chris Spielman for not going the Matt Millen route, because Rod Wood was trying to take him there. Rod Wood was trying to take him there, and he was like, hey, you want to be a GM? No, I'm not qualified, bro.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because for people that don't understand what Chef is talking about here, Matt Millen was an on-air personality or color analyst, whatever he was doing, on TV, and then he took and then he took the Lions GM job, and people thought that maybe he was highly qualified because he saw so much, being on TV and a former player, but he wasn't. Clearly, the proof is in the pudding, right? The Lions were completely destroyed during that era, and then destroyed again after that, even further, and that's why this time around it required more. And maybe Spielman, not only did he recognize his own talents and what he felt he would be good at doing, but maybe he recognized that making that same mistake twice could have been another detriment to the team. Like, and I think that it's amazing at how honest he was about his ability, and that really speaks volume to him as, you know, his character, who he is as a player, who he is as a person. There is so much more to Chris Spielman that and that's why I'm trying to do some of this stuff to really let the fans know just who these people were. You know, if you haven't taken the time to research, and it's not like people are writing articles on these people every day. I mean, you might get one a year, and if you don't see it, you're not going to know. So last year, what I started out with in my article was Chris Spielman, a Detroit Lions legend. Chris Spielman is a former NFL linebacker who spent much of his career with the Detroit Lions. I believe it was 8 seasons. He was known for his hard-hitting style of play and his relentless pursuit of the ball. And then in this blog post, or in this article, I wanted to take a look back at Spielman's career, his impressive stats and awards that he earned throughout his time in the NFL. Quickly, with his career, Chris Spielman was drafted by the Detroit Lions in the second round of 1988 NFL draft. That was a big deal back then, especially for a linebacker, but that was a big deal. He quickly established himself as one of the top linebackers in the league, earning a starting role and becoming a key player in the Lions defense. Throughout his career, though, Spielman was known, again, for his hard-hitting style of play and his relentless pursuit of the football, but he spent 8 seasons with the Lions before moving on to play for the Buffalo Bills and Cleveland Browns. And it was with the Buffalo Bills that he set that record, 216 tackles or whatever. It was over 216 in one season, which is really impressive. Really, really impressive. So next up, there was 3 keys to leadership that Chris Spielman spoke about. And this is the infamous napkin, right, that they've spoken about in the past. The meeting that they had, and they being, Rod Wood, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Sheila Hamp, Chris Spielman, Mike Disner, and others. They're talking about this. Sheila's spoken about this. Brad's spoken. They've all spoken about this napkin, right? And I think it's a napkin. I don't think it's a scratch piece of paper. But Chris Spielman kind of just scribbled 3 things down that they needed to stay firm with. If they're going to turn this team into something better than what it ever has been before, there was 3 elements that mattered most. The first one was leadership. When you speak about leadership, it's all encompassing. It's everybody. It's every single person doing their job to the best of their abilities, because if you fail, the next link in the chain can fail. If you don't do your job, somebody else may not be able to do their job. And that also resonates with the field, right? If you're the middle linebacker and you don't do your job, well, maybe the Sam linebacker or the Will linebacker can't do their job. And then the safeties and the cornerbacks are, probably going to take the brunt of whatever you failed to do. And it opens up problems. So leadership was one of the major keys for him. And then culture. Now, he also spoke to the word culture, and I'll get to that in a minute. But culture was a big deal. Clearly, it's been something that the Lions have been talking about every single season in, season out, on how important culture is, or team identity. And then staffing. And I found this one interesting because it's not just who you hire, it's finding the best at handling turnover. Because in the NFL, you're going to have turnover. Whether it's coaching, whether it's players, you're going to have it. Thankfully, the Lions have had a very minute amount of turnover in the coaching department, whether it's positional coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, clearly the head coach. They've pretty much kept everybody intact. But even all of the other positions, within the front office, keeping these people together is important. But when they leave, having the best people in place to handle it and find, new players or new personnel, new coaches, get better. So Rod Wood, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Sheila Hamp, Chris Spielman, and Mike Disner all signed this scribbled up piece of napkin or paper, whatever it was. And that was the contract that they began their relationship with. And to me, this is like so old school, right? I mean, you don't hear about this stuff. This is so old school. And that's what Chris Spielman is old school. He says, don't email me. Don't text me. If you need something, call me. That's how old school he is. He can't stand technology. And this just speaks volumes to wanting to bring the team back to its roots. Something is so minuscule as just a handwritten napkin starting their relationship and their contract. So, Eric, what did you think about this when you heard it?
Man, Chris Spielman, what a guy. And the fact that he can just put himself in a position of not greed, but a position of he wants the ultimate goal. There's something he couldn't do as a player, and that is win a Super Bowl. And he couldn't do it as a broadcaster, and that is what brought him back. I know that's what brought him back to the Lions more than anything, was he wants that ring. And he wants to do whatever it takes to win that ring. And he is the ultimate competitor to win that ring for the Detroit Lions. And I don't think there's any other team that he would have worked this hard for other than the Lions, because he knows what they've been through. He's been through it here himself. And now being a part of it on the other side of it, he wants the ultimate goal. He wants to win the Super Bowl.
You know, adding on to that a little bit, he spoke to his time as a player and how he has a quote in I think it was a Football Life. He had a quote where he was talking about his, eat, live, breathe, every single day, win a Super Bowl. That was his number one goal. And he felt that he was put in a position on this planet to do just that. Well, he didn't get to do it as a player. And to your point, he's now going to be able to do it as a different style of a player that's involved with the Detroit Lions organization in the personnel in the front office. So he's still a major player. It's just wearing different clothes now. He's got a backwards hat on and a t-shirt, sitting in an office doing big things. I mean, when you look at those positions around the league, you usually see him in, $1,000 Armani suits, kicking back, not him. Nope. He's nose to the grindstone, t-shirt on, no F's given type t-shirts on, and just gets to it. So Chef, why don't you take it away on what you felt about the three keys to the Detroit Lions change of the guard, really, and how it's been so instrumental in what the Lions have accomplished over the last few seasons.
I think that to a man and a woman, that everyone embodies these three keys. There's no selfishness. Everyone is in lockstep, and they're headed towards a common goal. And to piggyback off what you said yesterday, right, when we were talking about the men and women behind the Lions and their resurgence, and you said that everyone says that Chris Spielman is the glue guy. Once he started speaking, and once he started talking about how they went about identifying, first of all, recusing himself from the GM position, and then going about identifying the GM and identifying the head coach, all of those things, it started with him. Like Brad Holmes is here because of him. Dan Campbell is here because of him. Like his input and his stamp is all over this. So anyone that didn't know how much Chris Spielman had to do with the resurgence of the Detroit Lions, now you know.
Yeah, that's our goal today. Our goal is to let you guys know just how important this guy has been. He doesn't want any limelight, and he has said that. He had his time as a player. This is not about him. He doesn't want people talking about him. And that was another question that was asked of him is, I bet you recognize as you walk around, the city of Detroit or wherever you're going. And he said, nope. Nope. Quite simply, nope. That's just not what I want. That's just not what this is about to me. He had his opportunity as a player, and maybe he wasn't good enough. And he said that, that now his position is to help others. He said that he climbed a mountain in his lifetime. He did everything that he wanted to do, minus win a Super Bowl, obviously. Now he wants to help others climb a mountain. And I thought that was such an amazing statement to make. Like his service to others. And I'm not going to get, all into, other stuff, but his service to others is why he's here. He's trying to help everybody around him. He's trying to help Sheila get to that place that she wants to be in, which is hoisting a Lombardi trophy and bringing back the mojo back into Motown. And they're getting there, man. They're really getting there. And I said that I was going to speak about the term culture. Now, I use the word, very loosely at times. So I use it quite often. It does mean something in so many different ways to so many different people. But Chris Spielman hates this word. He hates this term. And he doesn't mean it in a negative way. He just uses the term differently. Quite simply, he does not like the word culture because everybody else is using the phrase now, and it doesn't have the same reverence as what it did before. Not that he hates a good culture or doesn't believe that a good culture and identity is needed. He does. He just felt like the word is overused, and he uses the term environments more often than he does the term culture. So I thought it was hilarious when he said that. I mean, I was kind of shocked. I was like, wait, what? What did he just say? He doesn't like culture. I mean, that's what they talk about every single day in Detroit. And it was a bit shocking. But when he explained himself, it made sense. Then the next part that was really funny, and I'm sure you guys remember this, mocking the term working on my craft. This was a highlight part of the video where I don't know if he was throwing shade at anybody in particular, but he said if he heard someone mention the term that they were working on their craft one more time, that he was going to jump in the middle of I-75 and have a car take him out. He quite simply wanted to tell people that you're not working on your craft. There's no craft being a football player. You're a football player. That's your job. Catch the ball, run with the ball, tackle the ball carrier. That's your job. You're not working on your craft. You don't work for the CIA or the FBI. You're not crafty. You just got to play football, make plays. And it was hilarious part of the show. And I'll put a link in the description to this show for the podcast. But it's on NFL on CBS again. Great podcast, great show with his brother Rick. And I can't remember the other guy's name. But anyway, we'll move on here. So in my article, I gave a little stat breakdown of Chris Spielman. Impressive stats, to say the least. He recorded over 1,000 tackles in his career. 1,000 tackles. That's insane. With over 100 tackles in each of 8 seasons. He also recorded 20 sacks, 6 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles throughout his career. And Spielman was known for his toughness and his ability to play through injury, missing only 3 games during his entire career. Chris Spielman rejoined the Lions in the front office role as a special assistant to president and CEO and chairperson in 2021. He played a very integral role in hiring the executive vice president and general manager, Brad Holmes, head coach Dan Campbell, and reports directly to the president and CEO, Rod Wood, and of course, Sheila Hamp, kind of her right-hand man, if you will. So for many years, there has been a disconnect within the franchise as it relates to the business and football sides of the operation. Remember, I wrote this a year ago. When Sheila Hamp took the reins her first order was to do away with the divisions and build a front office that thrived on collaboration and communication. And that was exactly why bringing people in like Spielman was so important, bridging that gap between the player and the front office. Again, another person that has done it at a high level on the field. And now you are putting that person into a very important role to help, be a voice for the players, but also be a voice for the front office, to the players. And I just found this whole transition of, what Spielman is doing now, very inspirational, and how teams are probably going to start again following in the blueprint that the Lions are putting down. Spielman felt that the timing just was right for him to finally assume a job at an organization that he's followed for years. Following his playing time in Detroit, which ended back in 1995. But he also drew on a ton of inspiration from team owner Sheila Ford Hamp, who apparently persuaded Spielman to take the job with a rousing speech. Little did anyone know about his brilliant business and leadership aptitude that was a perfect fit for the culture change coming to Allen Park. Spielman was a fan favorite for many seasons and for many reasons. As a Detroit Lion, his hard-hitting style, tenacious and gritty attitude was definitely feared on the turf. There's this quote here. So Spielman was an integral piece in finding Brad Holmes and hiring of Dan Campbell, but it was his connection with Sheila and Rod Wood that brought it home. And here's a quote. He says, "I have a vision that matches exactly what Rod and Sheila envision. And that's the only way this can work, because we are completely in sync of the direction of the culture of the building." Now, knowing now that he hates the word culture, he definitely used it quite a bit back then. And then he goes on to say that everybody understands the rules of playing in the NFL. It's all about winning games and losing games. I think the fans should look for somebody that's what the rules are. We have to be able to find that and identify that to give us the best chance to win games. Not quite sure what the last part of that quote was trying to speak to. But again, how do you get to all these great players? How do you find all of these great players? That was the next subject that we're going to get into now. And jokingly, he said that you have to work on your craft, and it was kind of a light moment in the podcast. But player development and evaluation is big, right? And Spielman knows this. In his analysis of college and NFL players, Spielman stresses the importance of fair and thorough evaluations. He often rewatches game footage to ensure his assessments are accurate. Spielman advocates for looking beyond statistics to understand a player's true impact on the game, focusing on their work ethic, attitude, and ability to perform under pressure. There's something else that he said, though. And again, I don't remember if it came from the Football Life or this podcast. I think it was the Football Life. But talking about rewatching film, Spielman said before games that he would go into the film room. He would put, a wide angle back end zone view on the screen. And he would get into his stance and make a play call and run through the game, watching the game, the team that they're about to play. And he said that before we got to the game, I already played the game 3 times. I thought that was just insane. Like, he spent that much time in the film room, probably moving all the chairs out of the room so he can move, right? And literally going through the motions, calling plays, going through the motions, and then getting ready for that's why he was so good. But that also will speak to why some of the players that are on this team now are so good. So when you guys heard these types of things coming from Chris Spielman and kind of how he embodies work ethic and what it means to him, Eric, how do you feel like that's now translated into the Lions of today?
Oh, yeah. And we don't pick up players that aren't like him. When you hear the announcer during a football game say, "Oh, this guy has great instincts to get his nose in there for the ball." No, the guy has ran the play 1 billion times. He doesn't have to think about it anymore. He's just reacting. And those are the types of players that Chris Spielman helps us bring in, is the guys that are going to do it so many times that it's second nature. They don't have to think about it anymore. They just react and they just play. And that's the reason I think that this year that Jack Campbell is going to have the biggest leap of any player on the Lions this year, because that kid is going to be like Chris Spielman and be in the meeting rooms and everything all off season, because they've already said that he didn't take any time off. All he's been doing is putting his nose into the playbook and doing like Spielman did, rewatching the games. He's rewatched the championship game a bunch of times, and he said he's over it, but he's ready to go back at it and get back there again. And he knows what it takes now, and he knows it's going to be harder the next time. So those are the kind of players that Spielman helps us bring in. And I think Jack Campbell is kind of like a reincarnate of Chris Spielman a little bit, that I'm willing to sacrifice my body on every single play kind of guy.
It's incredible that you said Jack Campbell is like a reincarnation of Chris Spielman, because that's exactly what I saw. That's when I watched his college tape and I was evaluating Jack before the draft. I'm like, man, this guy reminds me of somebody we haven't seen in the building in quite a while. And you know what? I think that there's a little bit of a shared wavelength between those two guys. Jack's going to be a special player. And the fact that he has somebody like Chris Spielman in his back pocket right now helping him, I think that we're going to see some great things out of Jack Campbell. We really will. Chef, what did you think? Same question to you. How is the importance of player development, evaluation, analysis of, what Spielman has done on and off the field and how he really embodies, rewatching game footage and going through the motions. How has that helped really translate, into what this new team is all about?
I mean, it's just obsession. That's what it boils down to. Whenever someone wants to be good at something, they do a certain amount of work. Whenever someone wants to be exceptional, they do a certain amount of work. But when a person truly wants to be great, they're obsessed. They're obsessed with their craft. All right. So they're obsessed with getting better. And we talked about it yesterday. We talked about, Jack Campbell. He's obsessed. We know he's just a monster. I've seen people talk about how he doesn't listen to music before games. He's just in the locker room staring at the floor. He's got a little bit of water boy in him, but it's a little bit more contained, so this kind of tenacity and this kind of obsession, it spills over into the evaluation. If you are watching film and you're going through the motions of a game before the game happens, you're going to have the same type of desire when you are watching other players, so you can evaluate them and you can understand, do they have this it factor? I call it the secret sauce. Obviously, I mean, it's on brand for me to call something the secret sauce, but when I've talked about this before about how Brad Holmes gives us kind of little inklings of the secret sauce. We don't know exactly how they apply it, but now when you're talking or you're listening to Chris Spielman speak, you're getting a little bit more information. Like, what is their secret sauce? How do they find people like Brian Branch? How do they find people like Iffy? How do they find people like Aleem McNeil? And these people, I mentioned them on purpose because they're not first round picks. Right. So how do they find the people in the later rounds, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round? Like, how do they do it? And now this type of information that's coming out is just helping us see and understand, giving us a better picture of how they have honed their craft to be able to select these players and to be able to evaluate these players the way that they do.
I think that's a great point. And I'm going to touch on culture one more time here. I kind of misplaced the segment, but honing your craft, it can start at any point in time. There's always been this, I don't know how you put it, but people say that when you do something for 10,000 hours, you become a master. And I understand that some people believe that they're a master at whatever they do. Maybe they're really good at what they do and they haven't put 10,000 hours in, and maybe they're the best at what they do. But it's always been spoken about that once you reach 10,000 hours, you should really be named a master at what you do. I would hope that you're really good at what you're doing after 10,000 hours of doing it, because if you're not, then I think that speaks to your level of, being obsessive about something and not putting the right type of work into it. But that's what he was speaking about with Brad Holmes, and how he got his first opportunity in the NFL, kind of in marketing department. And he just had this thing for the draft. And he always worked on his thing for the draft. And it was like a few years later, he finally got an opportunity to work within the confines of, player development and scouting department. Now you look at what Brad Holmes is able to do inside of a draft. I mean, he's been putting this together for like 15 years and really studying players and their mentality, their personality, their play on the field, the culture identity portion of this, and how important it is to have, like-minded individuals in the same room. And to your point, being obsessive about something to the point of being really good at it, it takes a special individual to dedicate yourself. It's a short window in the NFL. And Chris Spielman spoke to that too, that not everybody plays 10 years. Not everybody plays 5 years. Most NFL players play 3 years at most. I would say there's a larger majority that play 3 than play 4 or 5. So it's a very short window that you have to get really good really quickly. And for Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and the rest of the team to find these players that nobody else is seeing, the people are forgetting about, speaks volumes to how much time they put in behind the scenes to really, like you said, hone in on their craft and get really good at what they do. One more thing here on culture. So culture, or the word environments, like I said earlier, is what Chris Spielman refers to. He prefers the term environments, but clearly environment, that these guys produce around them is big. It's either a big detractor or a big protractor. And in this point, or in this case, it's been a big, protractor for the team. The way that these guys come in and do their job and emphasize that everyone needs to do their job at a higher level, emphasizes, again, just how important environment is. He said that you can't be idiots off the field, right? You have to mesh well with others. And that's the biggest component to culture, is who you are, not just while the coaches are watching you, but when they're not watching you. What are you doing when you're not under a microscope? Are you out there doing the same thing that you would be doing if someone was watching you, or not? And I think, the whole, the cat's away, the mice will play kind of, terminology that applies to everything in life. If you're not doing the same thing that you would be doing under the scrutiny of others, maybe you're just not doing it right. Maybe you're not doing it well enough. I don't know, but that's how it relates to football anyway. But leadership and team culture, Spielman emphasizes the importance of establishing a strong team environment or culture. He discusses his role in helping to build a winning environment within the Detroit Lions organization. He believes that leadership is crucial in setting the tone and expectations for the team. Spielman often highlights the significance of accountability, hard work, and integrity in creating a successful team environment or culture. First, reliability, no wavering here, right? These are the ways that they identify the players that you're talking about, Chef. And how do they identify them? It's through this. You have to be reliable. They're not going to waver on this. Your guys must be reliable. They have to show up. They have to be on time or early, right? They have to put the work in, and they have to be ready for game day. You have to know in your heart of hearts that they've studied the playbook, that they know the playbook inside and out. And if they don't, they're not reliable. And if they're not reliable, they're not going to do well on the team, on the field during a game. Instincts. This is a huge one. I mean, to me, this is the one that defines most players in the NFL. You know it when you see it. There's no measurement. There's no test. You can't take a blood sample. Instincts is something that you see. You either have it or you don't. It's like common sense. You either have it or you don't. So do they make high-level plays? Are they utilizing instincts on the field? And he gave some examples. When a guard is, engaged and, maybe they're in a zone blocking scheme, when do they disengage and hand off to the tackle to pull and get out? Linebacker, are they going, under, through, or around to make a play? What instinct level are they using? Is it working? Next up was the player must compete. Competes is a, big part of football, right? They have to play through the whistle. Not stopping before the whistle. It's echo to whistle. You just keep on going until there is no more go. I don't like seeing when players kind of lay up, and they just kind of, I'm not going to be able to tackle them anyway. Now go hit somebody. Go put a hit on somebody. Do something. And then leaders. They've got to have leaders. These guys need to be able to lead. And I think that we've seen that. How many players, I don't know if you would know this, Eric. I doubt it because I don't remember either. But how many? I mean, if you could just put a percentage, how many players do you think the Lions have drafted that were former captains at university level play, college level play? It's been a lot. I don't know the number. I honestly don't. But if I had to put a number, I'd say more than 50%.
I'd say even higher than that. That's one thing they really look for, is somebody that's a captain and a leader. They want people that are going to bring everyone else up in the room, not just themselves, but bring everyone else with them.
Yeah.
And like earlier, you were talking about mastering your craft, and it got me thinking, I went to the McNally Smith College of Music. I got a degree in bass guitar, and I traveled the country as a professional musician for about 15 years. And about 8 or 10 years into it, I was so good. And I look back, I remember thinking back, man, when I got out of college, I thought I was so good. I thought I was this hot shot bass player. I thought I was just the best thing since sliced bread, right?
Cat's meow.
Yeah. And I look back 7 or 8 years later, after I'd been in a band on the road, playing 5 nights a week, 52 weeks a year, traveling all over the country. And then I'm like, yeah, I sucked. Now I'm a master. Now I am, I really was. And, I could, without even thinking, I would know when my guitar player was going to go into a solo, or what he was going to do, or when he was going to end his solo. And we would play songs sometimes that would go for 45 minutes. We'd do a cover of, let's say, like a Jimi Hendrix song, Voodoo Child, and it would go for 45 minutes, and we never planned it. It's supposed to be a 5-minute song, and we 45 minutes later look at each other like, holy crap, what did we just do? And it's all without thinking, and we just knew each other so well, and we all knew our craft so well that we would all take turns doing solos and stuff. We'd know exactly when we were supposed to do it and what we were supposed to do without even thinking about it. But if you asked me to do that exact same thing 7 years earlier, there's no way I could have done any of that. It takes time to master your craft. It really, really does.
Yeah. And in the NFL, I mean, that's a very short window. You have to be really good really quickly. And if you're not, you're going to get left behind. I mean, these guys don't have 10,000 hours of time in the NFL. It's the 10,000 hours before you got to the NFL, that you should have already put in, right? And then it's putting as much time into it. And we'll talk about something else too here in a moment about, how Chris Spielman wants to make changes to the offseason program. But before I go on, same question to you, Chef. I mean, how do you feel about reliability, instincts, competitive nature of players, being a leader, and, the fact that we brought in a lot of guys that are former captains? How do you feel that resonates with the team today? And do you feel like it resonates with the team today, and why there's a big success here?
I mean, if we just look at the word captain, how does a teammate become a captain? They're generally voted on by their peers, by their teammates, as a person who is reliable, a person who is a leader, a person who is dedicated. So basically, they're just getting people who are embodying all of these qualities, and that is why they are going after captains and things of this nature. Now, these captains that they're getting definitely have talent, right? You're not having a bunch of Rudies out there, right? Just a bunch of guys that try hard, and they're lovable losers, I guess. I mean, we could say Rudy. I mean, he was just undersized. He had the heart of a lion, but that's not what we're relying on. We're relying on people who both have these qualities and they have the leadership, or they have these qualities and they have the talent. So I think that resonates with the team. I think when you walk into a locker room and you see a bunch of former captains and everyone's accountable and everyone is trying to do their job, hopefully we'll see a lot more of that this year on the defense, because there were a lot of people not doing their job last year. But this is just the type of environment that they have created, and it's palpable, it's contagious, and that's why the team is the way that they are. That's why everyone is the way that they are.
I believe it, man. I think it is so important to find good quality people to surround you. And like you said, it's infectious, right? It's a positive infection. You don't want negative people to surround what you do, because it ultimately, it pulls you down, right? You guys have all been there. If you're in a group of people and you just have that one negative Nancy it just kind of pulls the whole group down, right? I mean, you're out trying to have a good time or whatever, and you just got this one individual that's just pissed off about everything, just, mad about the Karens of the world, right? And that will infect your team faster than positivity, believe it or not. So finding the right individuals and multiplying it and finding more every year that embody being, what a captain truly is. And now you're 4 years deep and you've got multiple captains that you brought in, but guess what? They're not competing with each other. They're competing with each other in a good way, but they're all kind of on the same train, headed in the same direction. Look, we've got to get the rest of the guys up to speed. We've got to infect the rest of the guys with the positivity. And that's when he started speaking about players like Brian Branch. He said, his coverage, his movement skills, his instincts were off the charts. He can play all three DB positions, and he believes that he may go down. And I've said the same exact thing. He may go down as Brad Holmes' best draft pick ever, or one of, right? And I've said the same thing. I've also said the same thing about Sam Laporta. He could be another one of Brad Holmes' best draft picks ever, but there's others like Amon-Ra St. Brown. He spoke to why, Brown has lasted into the fourth round and why teams kind of forgot about him. And he said that his speed, coming out of college was a 4.6 around that area, 4.61. And that was the biggest reason why teams failed to realize how good he was, because when he played at 21 miles per hour. Big difference between a 4.6 and 21 miles per hour. His play speed was so incredible on the field. And some players do this, some don't, but some players do this. They may not run a 40 that well. And that's why I've always said I could care less about a 40 overall, right? Straight line speed doesn't happen in the NFL. Very rarely do you have, straight line speed is like Jameson Williams going on a fly route, going on a street, use, a 40 and up post or something. But it's not often that you're running a straight line, but utilizing, his speed to his ability, he runs faster during the game than he does in a 40. I'm not surprised. But also that, Amon-Ra St. Brown is pissed off and angry, completely angry in a good way, that he's got not just a chip on his shoulder, but a boulder sitting on his shoulder. And I thought all of these things that he was saying about these players, when you sit back and you think about how well they've played early in their career, that doesn't happen by mistake. It takes a very specific individual to be able to walk into an NFL locker room as a rookie and command respect from the players around you. And I know there's the whole rookie, what they call hazing. It's not really hazing anymore, but they can and can't do certain things as a rookie. But these guys have come out and played at a high level, and that commands respect from your peers. And you're not going to get there. You're not going to show up on day one. And Sam Laporta is in the same conversation. Jack Campbell's in the same conversation. You're not going to get there without being reliable. You're not going to get there without good instincts. You're not going to get there without competing. You're not going to get there without being a leader. And even though you may not be a captain right away, you still need to be a leader on and off the field. And that's what all of these guys are. Each independently are leaders in their own right. And the difference between, the Lions' best players, who we could consider right now the best players, Hutch, Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, these guys are the hardest working guys on the team. And they have the most energy, on the field during practice. And for the younger players, this shows them that they need to step it up, right? And now that some of these guys have recently been paid, and Chris Spielman spoke to this too, they get paid big money. Oftentimes what happens is, I'm good. I made my bag. I'm good now. I can just coast. Nope. Not Amon-Ra St. Brown. Aiden Hutchinson's been paid, with his rookie deal. He got a pretty big deal. Over $20 million. It's a lot of money. He's not coasting. He says watching Penei Sewell and Hutch go at it every single day in practice, he would pay just to watch that. Just how crazy they are with their work ethic. And I think it speaks volumes to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just got a huge bag and he's working even harder. And, these are the reasons why selecting players like this and really learning who they are before they enter the halls of Allen Park is so important. And the difference with the Lions' way of doing things is pretty simple. They don't care how much money you make, right? They don't care where you were drafted. If you don't put the work in, you won't play. And Chris Spielman also mentioned that Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, these guys have complete autonomy to do whatever they want to do. If Amon-Ra St. Brown decides one day that he's not going to work hard, he won't play. And I know that's crazy to say, but Chris Spielman just said it. He didn't say it about Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he said basically, you don't put the work in, you won't play. They don't care. They want the best people in all the time. And that's why you're seeing what you're seeing out of these players right now. Man, what do you think about that? You've got the best players, considered the best players, right? Sewell is like the number one right tackle in the league. Could potentially be the number one left tackle if he played there. St. Brown, top 5 wide receiver in the league. Jared Goff, definitely a top 5 quarterback in the league. And these guys are the hardest working individuals on this team. Aiden Hutchinson, got paid as a rookie over $20 million. Hardest working individual on the team. These guys do it week in and week out, day in and day out. What do you think that sets for an example for everybody else, and why it is so important to find the right guys early and often, and why Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have been so successful bringing these types of players in? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing I have spoken on this podcast a bunch of times about, these guys aren't here for the bag. These guys are here to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And this team is built. It's not bought. We're not the Bears. These guys aren't bought, but they got paid. Now listen, they got paid, but it was built, not bought. We didn't buy Amon-Ra St. Brown. He didn't come here as a free agent looking for the bag. We didn't buy Penei Sewell. We drafted him, and we built him up to be the best tackle in the NFL. And that's the reason the Lions are going to have so much success for such a long time. And I really think they're going to be successful for a very long time, because they're not going to break this up after 3 years. They're not going to switch coordinators every other year. They're not going to switch head coaches and GMs every 3 years. We're not going to get to Thanksgiving and everybody gets fired this year. You can feel it in your bones that it's different. This isn't the same old Lions. This is the brand new Lions. This changed. You felt the change, and you knew it. You knew when it happened. Everybody knows when it happened. It happened that last game against Green Bay when we went 9-8 and we had the first winning record under Dan Campbell. That was when everything changed. The switch got switched, and ever since then, it's been game on. And look at last year, 12-5. This year, I expect nothing less than 12-5. I predicted 15-2, but I expect nothing less than 12-5 and going to the playoffs. Hopefully, number 1 seed.
I don't necessarily expect them to have, more wins than last year. I guess when I look back at some of the predictions that I've made too, and we've had them on these shows, my only goal is that they have to win the North. However they do that, they have to win the North. And I think that's probably the most important fact of this season, or what should be a fact of this season, is that they just win the North. Because if they win the North, they're the number 1 seed in their division. Anything can go from there. I would love to see them be the number 1 seed overall. But I think that we've seen that wherever the Lions play, I think that they can win. And I think that that's a testament to their character and just how amazing they are, all the way up and down the roster in the coaching tree. And shout out to Adam, $4.99 super chat, says, I hope we can go from let's just find a way to get 3 to 4 stops to I don't care that we are running cover 2. We are better than you, and we will stop you. It's a great point. Chef, why don't you answer back on Adam's quote there?
Adam, I think what you're speaking to is you want the defense to be just like the offense. The offense has said, I don't care if you know that we are going to line up and run it down your throat. We're still going to line up and run it down your throat, and we dare you to stop us. And that's just what we're trying to get to on both sides of the ball. If we are the big dogs on both sides of the ball, it's going to be very, very difficult for the league. It's already difficult for the league because we're that way on offense. If we get that way on defense, I mean, the sky is the limit. The sky is the limit.
I agree with all of that. I mean, it's the we don't care syndrome, right? We'll tell you the play. Like, we'll literally tell you the play. Come stop us. Yeah, I love it. Great point, Adam, and thank you for your donation this morning. Really appreciate it. Brent also says that's probably why we get players with a chip on their shoulders. I think that's been a mantra of this team since day one, is they're finding players that are hungry. They're finding players that are a little bit pissed off. And I think, and I don't know this for sure, but it makes you wonder as you go through the draft and you know that a player was maybe pegged, in the second round and early in the second round, great stats in college, all of his marks are pretty good, character, personality, all that stuff. And then that individual is sitting there in the fourth round and they're pissed off. They are. And that they don't belong there. I wonder if there's any, how do I put it? I wonder if there's any reason why Brad Holmes wouldn't then focus or turn his focus onto the players that have been passed over. How do they mesh within our board at this point? Like, does it make more sense to take a guy that's pissed off that has all the ability? Or do I really need to stick to what's exactly on my board? I wonder if there's anything there. Like, I wonder if that's even part of his way of thinking. I need this guy now because he's been passed over and pissed off, and he's going to come in and work and has a lot to prove. Anything you wanted to add to on the players themselves and being leaders and the hardest workers and now being paid? Kind of the same question that Eric answered.
Yeah. Like I was saying yesterday, you can spend your money at different times. You look at Hutch coming in, and like you said, he got paid $20 million as a rookie, and then that speaks to common sense. Okay, so I'm here to do two things. Obviously, you don't play football for free and just for fun, right? You obviously, there's some perks that go with getting paid multi-millions of dollars a year. So I secured that as a rookie. I worked my tail off from the time I was 9, right? So I was 9 years old, and some people were 5 and 6 years old when they started playing. So I worked my tail off all these years. What is the purpose of getting to this point and then not working, right? Am I happy with those millions that I got the first 3 years of my career and see you later? Or am I just going to say, well, I got that money, that's fine, now let's continue to work the way we did? If you guys remember, I know you remember this person because he was just drafted this year, but all of the hoopla about Tavondre Sweat, and this was like the thing that he did right before the draft, just blew my mind.
Oh yeah,
the common sense factor, right? So is he a Brad Holmes guy? Could the Lions take him in the second round, maybe even the third? Blah, 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 blah. He's a massive man. And then he goes out, was it a week or two before the draft, and gets plastered drunk, and then gets behind the wheel of a car. I didn't understand. Like, how do you get that close to what you've been working for your entire life and then do something like that can throw it away? Jalen Carter did the same thing last year. He wasn't that close to the draft, but he knew he was going to go high. And goes to a club, gets drunk, starts racing.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It makes no sense. So when you talked about having common sense earlier, yeah, either you have it or you don't. But the one thing that I wanted to say, because I wanted to talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown's 40 time. And this perplexes me a little bit. One thing I believe, the 40s are for the fans, right? 40 times are for the fans. And they're not for all of the fans. Remember when you were a kid? Remember when you were watching Bo Jackson on television and you're like, damn, that dude is huge and he is fast. You didn't care. Like, what you weren't like, I wonder how fast he's running. Is he running a 4.42? Is that a 4.2? No, you didn't care about that. Right. So now the fact that you have actual talent evaluators that will pass on a guy who, it doesn't matter how fast he can run in shorts on a track. What matters is how fast he can run in pads. How quick is he? How does he get out of his route, out of his breaks? What is the speed at which he does those things? And you are a talent evaluator and you go, can't do it because he runs a 4.640. It just baffles me. I don't understand it.
It separates the good from the greats, man. I mean, you may or may not have heard me throughout my pre-draft process, how, I've always said the 40 doesn't matter. It matters, but it doesn't, right? It gives you an idea of what that player can be, right? It gives you an idea of just how fast they could be or how slow they are. I think 40s matter more for, to be honest with you, offensive linemen and defensive linemen, more than it does for wide receivers, cornerbacks, and running backs. And I know it sounds stupid, but the reason why is you, as a big man, you're not generally going to play much faster when the pads come on. But it helps you to identify that split, like how much get off do you really have? How much burst do you have, to get out in front of a block or to beat a blocker? But at the end of the day, it's the game tape. It's the film. It's now you have GPS values and watching, how they play with instinct, your instinct. And I've said this before, you can run a 4.25 40 and be the dumbest person in the room. And then you can run a 4.45 40 and be the smartest person in the room. Well, the dumbest person, and I use that term lightly. I don't really mean it against anybody, but the dumbest person, right? The one that doesn't know the playbook as well, that doesn't know where to be on the field as well. He's going to run himself really fast right out of the play. Whereas the other guy that's extremely smart, knows the playbook, runs 0.2 of a second slower. His instincts are going to put him into the play to make a play on time. So there is a huge difference in separator with talent and how these guys play fast in pads or don't play fast in pads. Their level of how do you say it? Adrenaline, if you will, matters during the game, because that adrenaline is what, propels you to be a little bit faster during the game time. So I think that it helps you identify, like I said, kind of who they are at the very beginning. But if you're not watching their tape and if you're not watching how instinctual they are with the ball in their hands or, making cuts, as a defender and getting down on the ball, jumping in front, of a wide receiver and putting yourself in position, playing out of position will make you slower. Playing within your position will make you faster just by default. Taking the right angle, there's a difference between, trying to cut the head off of a running back, and taking a wrong angle. Maybe you should have taken a 53-degree angle instead of a 45-degree angle. And that ball, the ball carrier is going to run past you because you try to cut it off too quickly, as opposed to meeting them, right, and taking a better angle. All of those things matter. So again, it doesn't matter how fast you are. You could have just ran really fast and got there too early, which we've seen, right? We've seen where guys take an angle and they end up in front of the runner, and then they've got to somehow try to stop and turn and make a play. It's almost impossible when you're running full go to be able to stop on a dime at an angle and then turn around and make a play. They're just going to juke you. You know, they're just going to put you on skates. So it's very important, man. It's very important to watch the whole player, not just a 40 time.
Well, I can tell you in one specific instance when a 40 time is really, really important. When you take a slow corner, let's say that corner runs a 4.6, and then you go, I've done a lot of work on him. His college technique is great, but then you don't really understand how his college technique and the scheme that you're drafting him to don't really fit his 4.6 translating to the NFL. So you draft him, and he's currently in the UFL. And
Who's this?
Tease Tabor.
Oh, Tease Tabor, yeah, or Tabor. Yeah, he was just never a great player, in my opinion. I think he was a product of, you know, the environment. You know, to shout out Chris Spielman.
Gators.
He's a product of the, you know, environment in Detroit.
I'll tell you, in the UFL, he looks a lot better and a lot faster. He's lost some weight, and the dude looks really fast. Go watch some of his tape playing with the Brahmas. He'll be in the championship game this Sunday. I'm telling you what, he looks like a completely different player than when he played for the Lions. He was a slug. But
the biggest question is, what is the competition level around him? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the biggest question.
Will he be the starting corner on your championship NFL team?
No, he'd probably still be, you know, 5th or 6th on the depth chart.
Yeah.
But, you know, the point that I think you guys are trying to make is it just didn't work out for him in the NFL. And, you know, now maybe he's in a better system, and systematically it's working for him. Last thing I had here on this whole Chris Spielman show this morning was changes to the offseason schedule. And I loved this because I've spoken about, you know, player health and player safety from a different perspective of scheduling, which is, you know, how they schedule the NFL season. But Chris Spielman was speaking more of how to develop your players and keep the development with the player longer, right? And challenges and adapting to the challenges or changes within football happen every single season. And Spielman discussed various challenges that faced teams and players alike each and every season, but including adapting to rules changes, evolving styles of the game, and now changes to the work schedule or the off-season schedule. Spielman offered some insight into how teams can improve their player performance by changing up the off-season program. Now, I don't have verbatim written down here, but I'm going to kind of give you the Cliff's Notes version of what he was talking about. He didn't understand why OTAs and mandatory minicamp and rookie minicamp and all that stuff happened so early in May and so early in June. And then they cut everybody loose for like 6 weeks. And initially what he was talking about is, why wouldn't we just start later? Like, what is the point of rushing everybody into the building after the draft to then just cut it loose? Like, why not have the draft and then everybody gets their break then? You've done all the work. Everything that you've done, it's done right now. I mean, the draft is done. You've done your work. The new league year has begun. Now take a break. Bring everybody back in, you know, in late June. And then put them through the OTAs and the mandatory mini camps, but then they stay for the rest of the year until the league year is over, until they're, you know, not playing any more football games. Made sense to me. And his brother Rick didn't like this idea. He thought, well, you know, what about these people that, you know, these players that have families and kids, and the only time they get off and to be able to really spend some good time with their families and their kids is in the summertime. But then Chris came back with another good point. Well, what about all the 9-to-5 people that get 2 weeks off a year? How do they do it? You know, and not everybody in the NFL has kids either. Not everyone's married. So the point that he was trying to make is, you put all of this money, like resources, time, training, development, you know, classroom work, all of this stuff, you know, that's in an off-season program, you put it into these players and then they disappear and they don't retain that knowledge. For the veterans, it may not be as impactful. Like they're going to retain the knowledge they've been around, but for the rookies, like they're the ones that are going to be losing out here because they're not going to retain as much. And the biggest thing that he said is now some of these guys will go see their offseason gurus and everything that you're trying to teach them. You know, this is how I want you to play. This is how I want you to do this. This is how, you know, the team wants you to do this. But then you go see this guru that changes everything up. And then they come back 6 weeks later and they're like a lost puppy dog. They have to retool and relearn everything again. So for me, I think that this was a great point that maybe you start the season a little bit later. And, you know, you don't have to go all day, every day. You don't have to be in pads from day one. You know, all of that stuff would pretty much remain the same, but maybe you go 3 days a week, you know, for the first 3 or 4 weeks. And then you go 4 days a week for the first, you know, couple of weeks. And then you have your training camp. But I think it made way more sense to let them start later in the summer. And I mean, most kids are out of school in June anyway. I mean, why couldn't you stay, you know, you go into the off-season program, you know, at the end of June. You still have 3 weeks that you can go on vacations and do whatever you want with your family. You know, the 3-4 weeks before that, maybe you're not going on vacations or whatever because you got kids in school. But I mean, a lot of these guys have access to, you know, nannies and, you know, homeschooling programs and all of these other things that they could do. There's a way to get it done. I don't think that there should be an excuse here that they're married and have kids and the only time they can spend, you know, together is in the summer. I don't think that that's a very valid argument by Rick Spielman, but for Chris Spielman, I think that this was smart. I think that it makes a lot of sense and maybe it's something that the NFL should look at. I don't know what you guys thought. Start with you, Eric.
Yeah, I'd love the idea. And what if they condensed the OTAs a little bit? What if they gave them 8 weeks off and condense the OTAs down a little bit before training camp? You know, like you said, just 3 days a week for the first couple weeks and give these rookies an opportunity to retain everything that is thrown at them because they get a lot thrown at them. And even the second year players are that they'll come out and say that, you know, the biggest thing for them was just learning the playbook because it's so much different than a college playbook. There's, you know, hundreds of plays instead of 70 plays. You know, you're 3, 4, 5 times more than a college playbook. And I got to say one thing here. So up in the comments, Bucky says, my project manager's dad is an ex-Packers offensive lineman. After sizing him up, I think I can take him. Does Rock On sponsor bail? Yes, Bucky, I will bail you out if it's a pack. If it's an ex-Packer, I'll bail you out every time.
Yeah, we don't sponsor violence here on Rock On Podcast Network, so I hope you're talking about a foot race. We will definitely sponsor a foot race. So, you know, to this whole point of an off-season program changing, the other thing that Chris Spielman was trying to hammer home here is the performance factor. You know, you get your training, you know, you got guys that are banged up, that are injured, that are receiving, you know, training. You got all your PTs there. You've got all your doctors there. What is the point of letting them leave? You know, and not retaining them in-house so that they can continue getting the treatment. And they always can. I mean, I think the door is always open. They can always come in and work out and use the facilities and all that stuff. But I think it made more sense, you know, to have these people, you know, have these players and the coaches and everybody together for a longer period of time prior to training camp and before the season starts. I mean, you can make the schedule work for you. I guess to the whole time off that's needed. I mean, you could go 4 days a week, you know, and they're only going like half days. Like they're only in the building for like 4 hours. If you've ever been to a training camp, they're literally there for like 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. That's it. They might get in at 7 and they're gone by noon, you know, before the sun gets too hot, you know, they're done. Or they might go inside after that and do, you know, film work or classroom. So, Chef, what do you think about this idea? You think it's a benefit to or potential benefit to the future of football?
You know, I've always got to come at it from a different angle. Rick Spielman was the general manager of the
Vikings,
Minnesota Vikings, and he was there when they brought in Kirk Cousins. Shout out Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is the family man in the history of the NFL. And he told us when we were watching the quarterback documentary on Netflix that he takes every Tuesday off to spend with his wife.
Yep.
He will not go to practice. He will not do any film. He will not do anything. Every Tuesday is time for him and his wife to go out on their dates, their walks with the dog, all of that stuff. So if he can get all that stuff done in season, I think that Rick Spielman has no legs to stand on here with his assessment that people that are married with kids need this time off and they can't work around the schedule. So I would say Chris Spielman 1, Rick Spielman 0.
You know what? You can tell that there's big love between those brothers, man. They feed off each other. But again, you guys have to go watch this podcast, and it was NFL on CBS. Detroit Lions brass. Chris Spielman talks picking star rookies, mental toughness, and Big Brother Rick. I'm going to go ahead and copy it right now. I'm going to throw it into the chat, and that way you guys can go check it out. And I'll also put a link in the description of today's show. So that was it. Now let me wrap up Chris Spielman's awards and some career highlights, and that'll be all for this morning. So Chris Spielman's play earned him recognition from the NFL and its fans. He was selected to 4 Pro Bowls, 2 All-Pro teams, and was named the Lions Man of the Year in 1991. In 1988, Spielman was named the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, and in 1990, he was named the Lions Defensive MVP. My conclusion about Chris Spielman was one of the most dominant linebackers in the NFL during his time in the league. His impressive stats, numerous awards, are a testament to his talent and dedication to the sport of football. Spielman's contributions to the Detroit Lions will always be remembered, and he will forever hold a place in the hearts of Detroit Lions fans around the world. One of the greatest players ever to wear the Honolulu blue, and now he's doing it again from a different perspective, from a different position. He's no longer on the field. He is in the front office, and he's leading from behind. But he's really leading out in front. He's changing the way that the Detroit Lions are doing things. Lastly, there was a period of time where Chris Spielman also had to deal with life, and his wife developed breast cancer. He ended up losing his wife, but developed a foundation. And I'll put a link to the foundation. I believe it's still available. This was, I think, an opportunity by design for Chris Spielman to really show his aptitude in the business side of things, but something that was personal to him. They just wanted to raise $20,000 for this foundation to help further the advancement of breast cancer awareness. And he raised over $1 million, and ever since has done an excellent job with it. I know this disease all too well. It has hit my family, and it's been very traumatic. Both sides of my family, in home and, with other people in my family. And it's very difficult to deal with. And the women that do have to deal with this, it is very hard for them. And it was very hard for Chris, obviously, and his wife, but it really showed a testament to who he was as a player, as a person, as a husband, really going out and doing everything and anything that he could. And there was a storyline to this where he kind of gave a speech that was like a huddle speech, that we're going to go and attack this. We're going to give it our all, we're going to go and kick its butt. And it wasn't like that, that loving speech. It was more of a football speech that he kind of gave to his wife, and how they were going to go and attack this head on. So there's a lot more to Chris than I think what meets the eye. There's definitely a lot of information out there on YouTube, but I would recommend watching the football life of Chris Spielman, as well as the podcast from yesterday. Great information. What an exceptional dude. Really does a great job. Career highlights: first team All-Pro 91, 2-time second team All-Pro 92, 94, 4 times Pro Bowl, 1989 to 91, 1994. Pro Football Writers Association All-Rookie Team, 1988. Pride of the Lions. Detroit Lions 75th Anniversary Team. Detroit Lions All-Time Team. 2 times Consensus All-American, 86, 87. Lombardi Award, 87. Chick Harley Award, 1987. 1,181 tackles. 10.5 quarterback sacks. Actually, that stat's wrong. That should be 20.5 quarterback sacks. 13 forced fumbles, 6 interceptions. An amazing career by Chris Spielman on and off the field, now leading the Detroit Lions from the front office. I think a lot of what has happened, all the evolution with the Lions here over the last, what will be 4 seasons, I think a lot of it has to do with what Chris Spielman has brought to the table. So last words on Chris Spielman, Eric, and then Chef.
Well, I'll say this. Chris Spielman said that he was put on this earth for one thing, and that's to win a Super Bowl. And I truly believe that Chris Spielman, in the role he's in now, is going to get his Super Bowl ring. 100%.
Love it.
Yeah. And of course, shout out Rick Spielman, Detroit Lions legend, Rick Spielman. I did learn from this podcast that Rick Spielman briefly played for the Detroit Lions. I did not know that before. But also, and shout out Michael Lucchis. He reminded us in the chat something that I wanted to touch on before, but it slipped my mind. But Rick Spielman said that every draft that he had with the Minnesota Vikings, he put his brother's picture on the draft board.
It was a playing card, right?
To remind him, just pick good players, right? Because he didn't have the 40. He ran like a 4.92 or something like that. But he said, just pick the best players, and all that other stuff doesn't matter. So shout out Michael Lucchis in the chat. Shout out Rick Spielman. Shout out Chris Spielman. Shout out Detroit Lions.
That was it was a playing card, was it not? Wasn't it his 1988 rookie card or something like that? Something like that. But yeah, I mean it's amazing what we hear about what these guys do and the little touches that are near and dear to their hearts, right? And I don't know, it just speaks volumes to the type of people they are. It really does. So anyway, another good show, fellas. Chris Spielman, Lions legend. Legend to many more off the field with his family, obviously his friends, his brother, great camaraderie there, and legacy he's left behind for his wife. But now we're moving into 2024, and we're going to see Chris Spielman's touches on this team, I think, just a little bit more. I think we're going to see Jack Campbell have an incredible season this year, but it's the type and the mentality of the players that Chris Spielman has spoken about so highly. And I'm ready to watch it, man. I'm ready to consume yet another season where you'll see Chris Spielman's fingerprints kind of all over this roster and all over what this team has been doing. So big shout out to Chris Spielman and what he's been able to do in helping Sheila get everything in line to produce a winning culture, working at their craft, Chris, to make it a better team here in 2024. All right, you guys, that's it for today's show. Rise and Grind Morning Show will be on tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. It is Thursday, so we're going to have Thursday night off the cuff right here starting at 7 p.m., not 8 p.m., 7 p.m. tonight. It'll be an hour-long show, and that's about it. So I'm going to wind it back just a little bit till we get to training camp, try to fit in some more family time myself and other things that I need to do around the house. So you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Go One Pride, go Detroit Lions. We'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye.